everyone, Jack from Edible Garden Growers here. On this episode we're going to be talking about how I harvest garlic, how I cure it, how I store it, how I braid it, and tips on how you can get your garden beds prepped for the next year wherever you're going to be planting garlic. So let's get to it because I want to show you how you can get the biggest bulbs possible. When it comes to harvesting, there's no one right tool. Just use what you got, use whatever best fits your application. For a while I used this guy, little pitchfork. Now I use this guy. It's a broad fork. If you don't know what a broad fork is, it's used for loosening up soil and replacing tillage equipment to not do as much damage to the soil. I typically only use this when making new beds, but then I also use it when harvesting garlic too, so I'll show you what that looks like. So these are the guys we're going to be harvesting. They're planted a little bit later than the other bed that I harvested a couple days ago. I've been pretty busy the last couple weeks between vacation, recovering, and work and whatnot. So I would have ideally harvested these probably about a week ago, but definitely no harm in harvesting them now. You can see that they're starting to yellow quite a bit, and these guys are even falling over. Once they're falling over, you definitely want to harvest them. If you let them sit a little bit longer, it's not a bad move for anything that you're wanting to save for seed. So if some of them look particularly big, not a bad move to leave them in the ground for an extra week. Stopped watering these guys about 3 weeks ago. You ideally want to give yourself about 2 weeks from when you last water until when you harvest. If the soil is really wet, it's going to be a pain to pull them out of the ground. There's going to be wet soil sticking to the sides of the bulbs. It's going to be a pain to get that off. You don't really want to deal with that. So letting things dry out will definitely make the whole harvesting process easier. So when using a tool like this or pitchfork, whatever you end up using, you don't want to get too close to the bulb and damage the bulb. If you damage the bulb, you're not going to be able to save it for seed if that's your purpose. You'll still be able to eat it, but you know, it's just best to not damage the bulb. It'll preserve its shelf life quite a bit. They come like 6 inches or so behind it. Don't need to go super deep. And then once you do that, bulb should come up. You're going to be left with something like this. If you stopped watering soon enough, there shouldn't be a whole lot of dirt that cakes onto there. There will be a little bit. So once you harvest it, it's ideal to just set everything on the ground right where you harvested it, let it sit for a day, let that soil dry out, and it should come right off the next day. And then we'll go into the curing process from there. So this bed is only on its second year, and I just lasagna mulched it, so threw down a bunch of cardboard, put a bunch of good soil on top, and it's been doing well. But you can see, it's a little bit hard to see with the lighting, the layers going on here. This top layer is going to look a little bit healthier, and as you get further down it turns browner and more dead looking. So my soil is not perfect, but these are still some pretty good sized bulbs. So I'm sure as I continue to improve the soil structure over the coming years, I'll just get better and better yields here. So there's two different types of garlic. There's hardneck and softneck, and then there's a bunch of, varieties within those. So this right here is a hardneck. Most of this bed is a softneck. You're not going to get these bulbs popping up. So on hardnecks, these guys pop up. This will turn into a flower pod. If you let this stay on, it's not going to be putting the energy it needs to into the bulb. You're not going to get the greatest bulb. So I didn't catch this guy because he was mixed in with all my softneck and just kind of snuck in there. But what you want to do is when you see these guys start to pop up, this is later than ideal. This is about to open, probably a couple of weeks ago, ideally. As this guy's popping up, you just break it off. Then it's going to start putting energy into bulb formation. But considering it's harvest time now, and I'm just now picking this off, this is probably not going to be the best bulb. But, it's fine. I harvested these off of all the other hardneck garlic a couple weeks ago. That white layer that's a bit hard to see because of the sun, it's a good healthy layer of mycelium helping these plants out. Brought all of the garlic to the backyard plot where I had some garlic going that I harvested about a week ago or so. So these guys will sit out here for a day or two. I'll come out tomorrow and check them. If it's not
looking like the dirt's all the way dried out, I'll flip everything over, let it go for another day, then shake the remaining dirt off, and then we'll get to the curing process. So once you let them dry out for a day or so, or however long you're going to leave them out, it's time to get to the curing process. So I say just use whatever you have. Don't go out and buy something unless you absolutely have to. I've got this rack that I keep in my greenhouse just that I can move around and use for whatever I may need it for. Gets used for a bunch of different stuff. So I use it as a curing rack for my garlic. Just take these guys, throw it on down there, and then let it sit there for, you know, however long it needs to. These guys are hard necks, so I'm just going to be leaving them as is and eventually chopping them down. Most of what I have in here is going to be soft neck garlic. So I'm going to be braiding this. So I'm just going to let these guys sit for a couple days. I've been pretty busy with my day job, so I was not able to get these onto this rack as quickly as I'd like. So they're probably only going to sit here for a couple days, dry out a little bit more. Then I'm going to start braiding them. You're going to want to cure them in a shady area that gets a bit of a gentle breeze, so there's some good airflow going on. Once you've let them cure for 2 to 3 weeks, then you're going to want to store them someplace that's going to be a bit chillier. So, you know, 45 to 55 degrees would be pretty ideal. I'm going to be braiding these in a couple days and then going to be moving them to my basement. So it's not going to be super optimal storage temperatures until we get a little bit further into the season and the basement starts cooling down a little bit more. But, you know, just work with what you got. I'm still going to be able to have these last for quite a while. These guys have a long storage life. I think they can last about 10 months or so if properly stored. So yeah, this is silver white. It's a soft neck variety. I got it from Hood River Garlic, and I've also got some hard neck varieties. They don't last as long. I think their storage or shelf life is 5-6 months or so. So I use those ones first, but they get much bigger cloves. So I'm a big fan of those guys. All right, so I've been letting the garlic cure for a couple weeks now. Probably been 2 weeks or so. You can see these are still pretty loose. If you let them cure for too long and you're wanting to braid it, these can get so dry that they just break and they're not going to braid very well. So you want to make sure there's still some, you know, play with them. You want to clear off any of the excess stuff. Take some scissors, cut off the bottom roots there. You don't need to go all the way to the base. Just clear them up a little bit. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on how to do this because there's plenty of videos and this is not the focus on this video. I'm going to just show you how I do it real quick. Alright, so I'm using some of my smaller ones. I haven't gotten my bigger ones yet. I start with the smalls, braid all those guys, and then sort out my seed stock for the following year. Some people say you can do this while it's still fresh, like the day you harvest it. I haven't tried that. It might work fine, it might not. I'm sure it does if people say it does. This is just how I'm doing it. Alright, so you're going to want some twine or string of some sort. You're going to start with 3. We're going to do 10 for this braid. I like to take the biggest one to start at the bottom that I got. I'm going to lay that down first. I'm going to take 2 more smaller ones, cross them like that. There's some space here real quick. You're going to take your string, tie it on there, make sure it's nice and tight. And so if you know how to braid hair, this will hopefully come a little bit easier for you. We're going to start by going from outside to in. And then wherever you take one from the outside and lay it in, that's where you're going to be placing the next garlic down with it. And then you're going to keep these together. So we started on the left to the center, now we're going to go from the right to the center. Going to take the next one, lay it with that stalk, keep those 2 together. Going from left to center. So you can see that's the only one with 1 left. Throw this guy right there, lay it with it. Go from right to center. Take your next one and just fill the gap wherever there's room for a garlic to fill, and then lay the stalk with whatever one you just put to the center. So now this one has 3, these ones have 2. Now we're gonna go from left to center. Take that guy, put it with those. We're gonna go right to center. Take this guy, throw it right there. Now we're gonna go left to center. Take that guy and that one in the middle, go right to center. Now you're just gonna finish that braid. You can do this with as many as you want or as many as the garlic will allow you to work with. Some garlic's gonna be easier to braid than others. This is silver white, this braids pretty well. It's got some nice long stalks. And then when you're running out of room to braid or running out of stock to braid, take another piece of twine, wrap it just below the end there, tie that guy tight. And I like to cut off whatever excess is there. Not a perfect one, but you know, looking pretty good. And then I like to just hang that guy from the wall or wherever you can work with. I like hanging them from my wall in my basement. And there you have a garlic braid. So I can't recall if this is the one I used for the demonstration. I think it is. But to just give an example of what I save for seed garlic versus what I'm going to be eating. So I save all the biggest ones that I can for seed garlic for the following year, and everything else gets eaten. So you can see these were some of my biggest ones of the season. These were some of my smaller ones, and then I had a good chunk in between. So you might be wondering what you can do to prep your garden beds for the following year, and one thing that I recommend doing is planting a bunch of buckwheat. I just let this stuff grow up everywhere in my paths because it does a great job of attracting beneficial insects that keep bad bugs at bay, but in its application to garlic, it unlocks locked up forms of phosphorus in your soil. So phosphorus that's not available to your garlic. Garlic are heavy phosphorus feeders and they do not want a lot of nitrogen. If you put too much nitrogen in, you're going to get a lot of foliage and not a lot of bulb growth. So I see a lot of people wondering what they can do to get their bulbs bigger. I recommend using bone meal or some other form of high phosphorus fertilizer, using compost, or you can just go simple and use something like buckwheat. Plant that shortly after you harvest your garlic. Till it in if you till. I no-till. So you can just chop it, leave it on the surface, do that a couple weeks before or a week before you're going to be planting your garlic. And then if you want, you can also top that with a layer of compost too. And then you're going to have much better bulb production come the following season. Everyone, I appreciate you checking out this video. I hope you learned something from it. If so, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe. Until next time, Jackson.